I thought my dad was my hero, until the night he slapped me across the face and told me I was no longer his daughter. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lana Hale, I'm 25, and I grew up in a house where nothing ever seemed missing. My dad, Gregory Hale, built a real estate empire worth over $30 million. People saw him as charming and generous, the kind of man who smiled in every magazine photo. To me, he was just Dad, the man who taught me to drive, bought me my first car, and said I could be anything I wanted. That illusion shattered during one dinner. It was supposed to be a normal family night, just me, Dad, and my stepmother Mira. The chef had just served roast lamb when Dad started talking about selling one of our apartment towers. I asked him why he was selling it to a company already under investigation for fraud. I didn't mean to challenge him. I was just curious. He froze, knife halfway through his meat, and stared at me like I'd just betrayed him. "Who told you that?" he asked sharply. "No one," I said. "I read the report myself." He slammed his hand on the table, the wine glasses rattled. "You don't question me at my own table." "Dad, I wasn't." That's when it happened. The slap was quick, loud, and final. I remember the sting, the taste of blood, and Myra's small smile behind her wine glass. He stood up, pointing at me with shaking hand. "You're done, Lana. You're no longer my daughter. You're cut off." I thought he was bluffing. But the next morning, the family lawyer called to confirm that I'd been removed from the will. All $31 million of inheritance gone. I sat in my car for an hour, crying, staring at the Hale mansion through my windshield. Mira stood by the upstairs window, her silhouette still, almost pleased. I called Howard Trent, our lawyer. He sounded uneasy when I asked why Dad was doing this. He paused before saying, "Lana, there's something you should probably see." He told me to come to his office that afternoon. When I arrived, he locked the door and pulled out a thick envelope. "Your father told me never to show you this," he said, sliding it across the desk. "But I can't keep this from you anymore." Inside were documents, birth certificates, adoption forms, all stamped and sealed. The name on the first page wasn't mine. It said infant female, unknown mother. My heart pounded as I flipped through the pages. "Howard," I whispered, "what is this?" He looked at me sadly. "Lana, Gregory Hale isn't your biological father. In fact, according to these papers, you were never legally adopted." I sat there frozen, trying to understand how everything I knew about my life could disappear in a single night. The slap hurt, but the truth hurt more. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. It was Howard Trent, our family lawyer. His voice sounded strained, nothing like the calm, careful man I'd known my whole life. "Lana," he said quietly, "we need to talk. Privately." I met him in his downtown office, the same place I'd gone to sign my trust fund papers years ago. Now the air felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Howard closed the blinds and motioned for me to sit. He looked older than usual, pale, nervous, like he hadn't slept. "I've been carrying something for a long time," he began. "Your father ordered me to keep it sealed. But after what happened last night, I can't." He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a thick brown envelope, the same one he'd shown me before. Only this time he opened it. Inside were papers, yellowed with age, signed by people I didn't recognize. "These are your adoption files," he said softly. "They were never finalized. In fact, your name, your identity, was falsified." My stomach turned. "Falsified? What are you talking about?" Howard hesitated. "Gregory Hale registered you as his biological child. But legally, that's not true. You were never adopted through the court system." It felt like the ground tilted beneath me. "So what am I then?" He didn't answer. He just slid the documents toward me and said, "You deserve to know." I left his office shaking, gripping those papers like they might burn through my hands. The drive back to the estate felt endless. My thoughts kept circling. Lies, secrets, the slap, Myra's smile. When I walked through the front doors, Gregory was in the living room reading the newspaper, calm as ever. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look up. "There's nothing to talk about." I dropped the documents onto the table. "Then maybe you can explain these." His eyes flicked down for a second, then back to me. No surprise, no guilt, just annoyance. "You went to Howard," he said flatly. "You shouldn't have." "So it's true." I pressed. "You faked everything?" He folded the paper neatly and stood. "Don't use that tone with me. You should be grateful for the life I gave you." I felt my throat tighten. "Grateful? For a lie?" "You're acting like a child," he snapped. "You'd still have everything if you just learned to stay quiet." Before I could answer, Mira entered from the hallway. Her perfume filled the room before she spoke. "Lana," she said coolly, "you need to accept reality. You have a roof over your head, clothes on your back. Why dig into things that don't matter anymore?" I stared at her, speechless. They weren't just hiding something. They believed they could control the truth. I picked up the papers, my hands trembling but steady enough to hold on. "If you both think I'll forget this, I said, my voice low. You're wrong. I'm not doing this for money. I just want to know who I am. Neither of them spoke as I walked out the door. The silence behind me was heavier than any slap. The drive to Riverside General Hospital took 3 hours. I'd memorized the address from the adoption papers, the only place listed under birth location. The building looked old, its bricks faded, the sign rusted around the edges. It felt wrong that a place connected to my beginning looked so forgotten. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and dust. I walked to the front desk, holding my breath. Hi, I said, trying to sound steady. I'm looking for records from about 25 years ago. Birth records. The young receptionist blinked. Those aren't digital. You'd need the archives department, but most of the staff from back then are gone. Something in me refused to give up. Is anyone still here who might remember? She thought for a second. Maybe Evelyn Ross. She retired a few years ago, but she volunteers on weekends. You might find her in the old ward. I followed the narrow hallway until I found a small woman arranging flowers at a patient's bedside. Her gray hair was tied back neatly, her hands steady despite her age. Mrs. Ross? I asked. I'm looking for information about a birth that happened here in 2000. She glanced up, studying my face. That's a long time ago, dear. Do you have a name? I hesitated. That's the problem. I don't know if the name I grew up with is real. Something flickered in her expression. She motioned for me to follow her into a quiet lounge. I worked here then, she said slowly. We had a situation that year. A baby went missing from the maternity wing. Never found. Broke everyone's heart. Her words made the room feel smaller. A missing baby? I whispered. Yes, she said, eyes narrowing slightly as she looked at me. You have a little birthmark on your left shoulder, don't you? My breath caught. How did you know that? I remember the mother, she continued softly. She kept describing that mark, said her baby had it shaped like a small crescent. She never stopped asking questions. The sound of my heartbeat filled the silence. That mark had always bothered me, the odd curve, the darker edge. I'd spent my teenage years hiding it under makeup or sleeves. Now it felt like proof of something I didn't want to believe. Evelyn sighed, her voice trembling. The family searched for years. The police suspected an inside job, but no one was ever charged. Then the case went cold. She looked at me again, eyes glistening. You said your name was Hale? I nodded. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I think you might be the child they lost. I couldn't speak. The weight of her words pressed down like air too heavy to breathe. Every memory I'd had, my father's face, our house, my childhood, blurred into something hollow. I thanked her and left before she could see me cry. Outside, the late afternoon sun hit the windshield, sharp and blinding. I started the car, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The road ahead looked endless, but I couldn't stop driving. I needed answers, no matter what they destroyed. 2 days after meeting Evelyn Ross, I sat in my apartment surrounded by old newspaper clippings she'd mailed me. Each headline felt like a knife. Infant vanishes from Riverside Hospital. Beneath one article, a name appeared over and over. Detective Samuel Morales. Evelyn said he had handled the investigation back then. I found his number in the corner of one of her letters, written in shaky blue ink. When I called, his voice was older, rough but still sharp. You're the young woman Evelyn mentioned, he said. If what she told me is true, you'd better come in. His office was in a quiet part of town, filled with old case boxes and the faint smell of coffee that had been reheated too many times. He studied me the moment I walked in. You look just like her, he said. Like who? I asked. Mara Collier, the mother of the baby who vanished from Riverside 25 years ago. He reached for a folder, pulled out a faded photograph, and laid it on the desk. My breath caught. It was a baby, dark curls, small face, and on her bare shoulder, a curved birthmark exactly like mine. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. That's me, I whispered. Morales nodded slowly. We always thought the child was taken by someone connected to the hospital, but the trail went cold after a few months. The Colliers never stopped looking. He handed me a business card with an Oregon address. They still live there. If you're ready, we can do a DNA test to confirm. I wasn't sure what scared me more, finding out I was right or proving it beyond doubt. Still, I agreed. The sample was taken that same afternoon, quick and silent. Morales promised to send it to a state lab and call me once the results were ready. Driving home, I replayed the nurse's words, the photo, the look in Morales's eyes. The truth was unfolding faster than I could breathe. That night, my phone rang. I expected Morales. Instead, it was Mira. Her tone was low, controlled. Lana, I know what you've been doing, she said. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're opening doors that were closed for a reason. What reason? She paused, her voice turning sharp. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the sound of her threat echoing in the quiet room. For the first time, I realized they were afraid, not of losing me, but of losing control. 2 days later, Morales called. His voice carried both relief and gravity. "We got the results," he said. "It's a match. 100%. I sank onto the nearest chair, gripping the phone. "So it's true," I murmured. "It's true," he said. "You're not Lana Hale. Your real name is Lana Collier. Dean and Mara Collier are your biological parents." The world went silent around me. Every lie, every bruise, every word Gregory and Mira had spoken twisted into one truth. I had never belonged to them. The lab report sat on my kitchen counter, pages stamped with the state seal, and my new name, Lana Collier. The numbers beside each marker confirmed what I already knew, but seeing it written made it real. Gregory Hale wasn't my father. Every birthday, every hug, every lesson had been built on a lie. When I drove to the Hale estate, the gates opened automatically, as if they still recognized. The house stood cold and perfect, exactly as I remembered, though it no longer felt like home. Gregory was in his office, leaning over his desk, the same desk where I'd once done my homework as a kid. He looked up when I entered. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. I dropped the report in front of him. "You stole me." His hand trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages. "Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter. You lied about everything." He sighed and sank into his chair. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he said. "You were meant to have a better life. You would have grown up poor, forgotten." My stomach turned. "You kidnapped me and called it saving?" He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his confidence stripped away. "There were arrangements made through people I trusted. Money changed hands. I didn't ask questions. All I knew was that you needed a home." I stepped closer. "You mean you bought me?" He didn't deny it. A faint sound came from the doorway. Mira stood there, arms crossed, calm as ever. "Don't act shocked, Lana," she said. "You think you'd have survived with those people? Gregory gave you everything." I turned toward her. "You were part of it?" She smiled slightly. "I handled the details. He couldn't have done it without me." The room spun. "You both knew. For 25 years, you let me believe I was your daughter." Gregory rubbed his temples. "I loved you like one. Love built on lies isn't love," I said sharply. He stood and reached for me, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You have to understand, I wanted a child. I couldn't lose Mira again after her miscarriage. When the chance came, I took it." I stared at him, barely hearing the words. Every excuse sounded smaller than the truth. "You destroyed another family to build your own." He looked down, silent. Something in me hardened. "I'm done letting you control what I know." He looked up, eyes pleading. "You'll ruin everything if you tell anyone. Maybe it deserves to be ruined." For the first time, I saw fear in his face. Not fear of losing me, but fear of exposure. I turned toward the door. Myra's perfume lingered as she whispered, "You don't know what you're starting." I met her eyes. "No, you don't know what you ended." I walked out without looking back. The night air felt sharp against my skin. The truth was ugly, but it was mine now. And as I started the car, one thought burned steady in my chest. This wasn't over. The road to Oregon stretched quiet and endless, lined with pine trees that whispered in the wind. Every mile brought me closer to people I'd never met, but somehow belonged to. Morales had called ahead, telling them I was coming. He said they wanted to see me right away. I didn't know what I'd say or how to start, but I couldn't turn back. Their house sat on the edge of a small town. White siding, a porch swing, flower beds trimmed with care. Nothing about it looked extraordinary, yet my heart pounded like I was about to open a door to another life. When the screen door creaked open, a man stepped out first. His hair was gray, his eyes warm but tired. "Lana," he said, voice trembling. Behind him, a woman pressed her hand to her mouth. "Dean," she whispered, "it's her." I froze on the walkway, unable to move until Mara reached me. Her arms wrapped around me before I could even speak. She was smaller than I imagined, her embrace trembling with years of longing. "We thought you were gone forever," she said against my shoulder. Dean joined her, his hand resting gently on my back. He didn't say much, but his eyes held everything words couldn't. We stood there for what felt like forever, three people bound by time that had been stolen from. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and old wood. Family photos filled the walls, birthdays, graduations, vacations. In every picture, there was an empty space where I should have been. Mara noticed me looking and said quietly, "We kept your room. It's still there." She led me down the hallway to a small door. Inside was a nursery frozen in time, faded wallpaper with painted stars, a crib turned into a shelf, a dusty teddy bear sitting on the dresser. I ran my hand across the wood, feeling both a connection and a loss too deep to explain. At dinner, we sat around a small oak table. Dean spoke softly about the night I vanished, how he'd left the hospital to get coffee, how everything changed in minutes. "They told us someone must have taken you," he said. "We searched every lead for years, but the trail always disappeared." Mara's eyes filled again. We held on to hope until it hurt to breathe. I wanted to give them comfort, but all I could offer was truth. Gregory, Used what happened to hide his business crimes, I said slowly. He built his empire on forged papers and stolen lives. Mine was just one of them. Dean's jaw tightened. He turned your pain into protection for himself. Mara shook her head in disbelief. How can someone do that to a child? I looked at both of them, feeling the weight of every year we'd lost. I can't change what he took from us, but I can make sure he never does it again. The wind outside rattled the windows as I spoke. The house felt small but safe, like it was holding us together for the first time. For the first time, I wasn't running from the truth. I was walking toward justice, and I wasn't going to stop. Back in the city, I knew what had to be done. Morales had enough to reopen the case, but not enough to bring Gregory and Mira down. Words weren't proof. I needed something they couldn't twist. Mira was careless when she felt powerful, and I planned to use that. I called her one afternoon, my voice steady though my hands shook. Mira, I want to talk. I've been thinking about what you said, about letting the past stay buried. A pause, then a smile in her tone. So, you finally came to your senses? Maybe, I said. Let's meet. Just us. She chose a quiet cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place with old music and more shadows than customary. I arrived early, a small recording device hidden inside my purse. When she walked in, she looked perfectly put together, her confidence like armor. You look tired, she said, sitting across from me. Guilt doesn't suit you. I'm not guilty of anything, I replied. I just want answers before I decide what to do. Her eyes flickered, cautious but intrigued. And what do you think you'll do? Maybe forgive. Maybe forget. She smiled, leaning forward. Gregory always said you were clever but naive. He wanted to protect you from the truth. If he hadn't intervened, your life would have been nothing. Intervened? I asked carefully. You mean when he took me? Her words came without thought. He didn't take you. He paid for the transfer. There's a difference. My pulse quickened. You admit it then? He bought me. She froze, realizing too late what she'd said. Her voice hardened. Watch your tone, Lana. You wouldn't have survived a month with those people. I sat back, pretending calm. Maybe not. But they were still my parents. The silence between us stretched, sharp and heavy. She finally stood. If you were smart, you'd walk away now. Gregory's lawyers will destroy anyone who tries to drag his name through the mud. I let her leave without another word. My hand closed around the recorder in my purse, the red light still glowing faintly. I'd gotten what I needed. That evening, I met Morales in his office and handed him the device. He listened to the recording twice, his face grim. This is it, he said. We can open formal charges now. The next morning, the news broke that the police had launched a new investigation into Gregory Hale's company and personal affairs. Reporters swarmed the gates of the mansion, but Gregory didn't bend easily. His lawyers pushed back, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that I was confused, unstable, ungrateful. I knew he'd fight like that, so I played along. I went back to the house under the pretense of peace. I told him I wanted to fix things, that I didn't blame him. His expression softened, cautious but hopeful. You mean that? He asked. I smiled faintly. Of course. Family sticks together. He didn't see the quiet resolve behind my eyes. Every word I spoke, every gentle tone was part of the setup. I wasn't there to forgive. I was there to finish what he started. Only this time, he'd be the one trapped. Gregory believed every lie I told. The calm voice, the softened eyes, the promise of reconciliation, all of it crafted to disarm him. For weeks, I met him for coffee, joined him for dinners, and listened as he reminisced about the empire he'd built. Each meeting was another brick in the trap. When I finally suggested transferring some company shares as a symbol of peace, he didn't hesitate. You're my daughter, Lana, he said with the same false warmth he'd used my whole life. If this helps you trust me again, I'll do it. I smiled carefully. It would mean a lot to me. A new start, no lawyers, no fights, just family. He wanted to believe it so badly. The documents were already prepared, drafted by a friend of Morales's who knew exactly how to make them airtight. On the surface, they looked like harmless paperwork restoring my name in the company. Hidden within the fine print, they gave me controlling shares, full ownership. We met in his study, the room filled with sunlight and the faint smell of cigar smoke. He read the first page, barely scanning the rest. So this just reinstates your role? Exactly, I said softly. It's just a gesture of forgiveness. Mira stood nearby, suspicious but silent. You're being too generous, she muttered. Gregory waved her off. This family needs peace. Then he signed his name, bold, careless strokes that sealed his fate. I watched his pen glide across the last line, then took the folder back, slipping it into my bag. My voice was steady when I said, Thank you, Gregory. I'll make sure the paperwork gets filed today. Minutes later, the sound of tires screeched outside. Sirens cut through the quiet afternoon. Gregory frowned, moving to the window. What's going on? Before I could answer, the front door burst open. 2 detectives entered, followed by Morales. Gregory Hale, Morales announced. You're under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy. Gregory turned toward me, confusion flashing into horror. Lana, what did you do? I met his gaze. I told the truth. Myra's face drained of color. You tricked us, she shouted, stepping back toward the side door. She bolted, her heels clattering against the marble floor. One officer chased after her, the echo of their footsteps fading down the hall. Gregory stood frozen as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. You can't do this, he said, voice cracking. I built everything for you. No, I replied quietly. You built it on someone else's pain. He looked smaller then, shoulders slumped, eyes wet with disbelief. For a second, I saw the man I'd once thought was my father, but the image vanished as quickly as it came. Mira was dragged back inside moments later, still struggling, shouting about lies and betrayal. Neither of them looked at me again, as they were led out to the waiting cars. I followed to the doorway, watching the flashing lights reflect against the mansion's glass wall. My face didn't change, not even when the cars pulled away. I felt nothing, not triumph, not grief, only a strange stillness. The empire Gregory Hale built was gone, and so was the hold he had on me. Within a week, the name Gregory Hale filled every newspaper in the country. Headlines shouted the story. Real estate tycoon arrested in decades-old kidnapping scandal. Photographers camped outside the courthouse gates, shouting questions to anyone who looked like they might have answers. The empire that once seemed untouchable was collapsing brick by brick. I stood behind the podium in front of a line of flashing cameras, the morning sun glaring against the glass steps of the courthouse. Morales stood off to the side, along with my real parents, Dean and Mara Collier. Their hands were clasped tightly together, the years of quiet suffering finally seen by the world. The crowd quieted as I adjusted the microphone. My voice was calm, steady. I know everyone wants a statement, I said, but I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth. For 25 years, my life was built on someone else's lie. My parents, my real parents, spent that same time living with a hole they couldn't fill. Today, that ends. Flashes went off like lightning. Reporters shouted follow-up questions. What will happen to the company? Will you keep the inheritance? How do you feel about Gregory Hale? I answered none of them. I simply stepped back, letting Morales take over the press briefing. Afterward, Dean wrapped his arm around my shoulder, whispering, "You did good, kid." Mara smiled through quiet tears. "You're home now." Their warmth should have felt like peace, but beneath it all, a hollow ache remained. That night, I watched the news from a small motel outside town. Every channel replayed the same footage. My speech, Gregory's arrest, Mira being led into a police car. Commentators dissected every word, every glance. They called me brave, strong, relentless. None of them saw what it had cost. The next morning, I packed my bags and headed north. The road to Oregon felt softer this time, like the weight pressing on my chest had finally started to lift. When I pulled into the Collier's driveway, the air smelled like rain and pine. Mara waited on the porch, waving. Dean stood beside her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Inside, the house felt warm and alive. Photos had been added, new ones with me in them. A picture from our reunion sat in a frame above the fireplace. For the first time, I saw myself where I belonged. Later, after dinner, I stepped out onto the porch alone. The night was quiet, the wind cool against my skin. I thought about Gregory's face as the handcuffs clicked, about Myra's sharp voice fading down the hall, and about the empire that had turned to dust. I had told the world I wasn't driven by revenge. Maybe that was partly true. But deep down, I knew the moment the truth shattered his world, something inside me settled. Justice didn't erase the pain, but it gave it purpose. As I looked out at the dark horizon, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned, like the first breath after drowning. The lies were gone, and what remained was mine to rebuild. Months passed before I decided to see him. The trial was over, the company dismantled, and the estate sold to pay restitution. Gregory Hale now lived behind iron bars and gray walls, stripped of everything that once made him powerful. Still, a letter arrived from the prison every few weeks, his handwriting tight and restless. "Please come see me. I need to explain." I didn't answer, not until one morning when I found myself holding the latest letter, my name written carefully across the envelope, Lana Hale. It didn't belong to me anymore, but I needed to close that final door. The prison smelled of bleach and concrete. The guards led me through a maze of corridors until I reached the visiting room. He was already sitting there, wearing a faded uniform, hands folded on the table. For the first time, he looked small. "Lana," he said as I sat down, voice cracking. "I didn't think you'd come." I stared at him in silence. The lines on his face were deeper, the charm long gone. "I never meant for things to end like this," he continued. "It was Mira. She pushed me. She found the contact who arranged everything. I only wanted to give you a better life." I met his eyes, calm and steady. "You always said power meant control. That's what you taught me." He He blinked, confused. What does that mean? It means I learned from you, I said. But I'll use that power to undo what you did. He reached across the table, hands trembling. You can't hate me forever. I don't, I replied softly. But I can't forgive you either. The guard called time. Gregory's lips parted like he wanted to say more, but the words never came. As I stood, I looked at him one last time. Whatever hold he had on me ended there, in that room filled with echoes and regret. Outside, the sky was clear, sunlight sharp against the cold air. I drove straight to the lawyer's office, where the paperwork for the trust fund awaited. $31 million, once meant to secure my future, now felt like blood money. I knew what to do with it. Within days, every cent was transferred to foundations that searched for abducted children and supported families still waiting for answers. When the last document was signed, I felt a quiet kind of peace, not joy but closure. A week later, I stood in a government office, a single form in front of me. It was the final step. The clerk handed me a pen and asked, what name should appear on the record? I hesitated only for a moment before writing it clearly, Lana Collier. As the clerk stamped the papers, I traced the letters with my eyes. The name felt steady, real. The girl who once lived in lies was gone. I whispered to myself, barely loud enough to hear. Now I know who I am. Then I walked out into the sunlight, leaving the last shadow of the Hale name behind forever. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from, or should I have tried to forgive? Tell me in the comments. I'd really love to know. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.